The Labor Day weekend sale is on at Tanger Outlets. Score up to 70% off at top brands like Nike Factory Store, Crocs, J. Crew Factory, Gap Outlet, and so many more. Refresh your wardrobe with the latest arrivals for less from all your favorite brands this Labor Day weekend. Tanger Outlets. Always on trend, always on sale. Plan your trip at Tanger.com.
You're listening to the Think Unbroken podcast, and I'm your host, Michael Unbroken. I'm an author, speaker, coach, and advocate for adult survivors of childhood trauma and abuse. In this podcast, you will learn how to transform your trauma into triumph, turn breakdowns into breakthroughs, and go from victim to being the hero of your own story. You can learn more at thinkunbrokenpodcast.com, and of course, check us out on Apple Podcasts and Spotify at Think Unbroken Podcast. Samantha Harte, welcome to the podcast, my friend. I've been very much looking forward to having this conversation with you. You know, there is something tremendously powerful about the journey that we go through addiction and learning self-love and the chaos of understanding our families and the implications that they have on us. And then ultimately being able to become a person who's okay with the reflection in the mirror. And when I had the opportunity to sit down and research you and understand you, I thought to myself, this is a person who gets what the healing journey is really about. So first, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much. It's so refreshing to talk to somebody like you who thinks that way about healing, because part of what I want to do in this space is bring a real rawness and authenticity that is desperately needed and missing. I made a post recently about
it is
some place in Malibu I went into, and every piece of swag that they were selling in the coffee shop said, "Good vibes only." And I stood there with my camera facing me and made a post and said, "I call."
Ole. You have to have bad vibes. Like you have to have negative energy to find the light. And I think that, and maybe we'll get into this, but we live in a very soft society right now. And I think it's doing people a tremendous disservice, but I don't want to step into that just yet. You know, in hearing your story, knowing your background and what you do now in helping people, I think we have to start at the beginning, because I really want to paint a picture here so people understand that we're not just having a conversation about someone who changed their life and they're great, because I don't think that benefits anyone in any capacity. What I'm really curious about, if you could describe your childhood in just one word, what would that be?
Boundaryless.
What does that mean?
I saw things. I was exposed to things. I tried things. I heard things that a young girl should never have. And the way that set the tone for what I would try as a young girl, what I would think was okay, what I would justify, what I would try to control that I absolutely couldn't, got pretty f***ed up pretty quick. And there's other words, believe me, when you ask that come to mind. But that one probably had maybe not the largest imprint, but one of the largest. So really, there's so much fuzziness in the childhood experience. There's so much I don't remember that I wish I did. But when I really feel like my memory bank came online, it's in early adolescence. And by that time, my dad was resigned to the basement. He had done enough things to my mother when I was little that I didn't see and didn't know. I only had my mother's word to go off of. That made him utterly irrelevant. He gambled away our life savings. He rejected my mother physically, emotionally for years and years and years and years. And as soon as my mom found out what he did with the money, she said, "You, never again." And he was in the basement. "Well, we can't get divorced. That would be too hard on the kids." "Oh, okay." So the solution was my father was emotionally absent and he put his tail between his legs. And my mother told us everything about what he did and didn't do, all the extramarital affairs that she was having, that she was completely justified in having. She was an untreated anorexic. She would eat like a bird and then spout off at the mouth saying how amazing it was to be able to eat in moderation anything you wanted. And all those fat people just couldn't control themselves. She would pop prescription pills at night and disappear emotionally, and it would frighten me. One of my earliest memories is questioning why she took those pills every night because it scared me. She was so emotionally vacant. It was like being in the presence of a ghost. So I spoke up like kids do. And she said, "Do you like the things you have?" Of course, I said, "Yes." "Well, in order for me to give you the things that you have, I need to work. And in order for me to work, I need to sleep. And in order for me to sleep, I need those pills." What did I learn in that moment? Oof. Well, is it my fault she takes those pills? And do not ever ask that again. In fact, if you have an intuitive thought or idea, shut that down, because that is going to put you in farther proximity from the one caregiver you need to keep you safe and loved in the world, right? So really, one of my earliest coping skills, if you will, addictions, if you will, was to self-abandon, was to people please, was to become whatever anybody needed, take the emotional temperature of everybody else in the room at the expense of myself. And also to please and perform as best I could, because another thing that was really drilled in my head as a young girl was anybody who believes in God is an idiot. And the only person you can count on is yourself. And you better get your degree because nobody can take it from you. I also had an older sister who, during the pubescent years, was, gaining weight, had a big nose, had frizzy hair, and she was miserable. She also had, even to this day, things I don't fully know or understand, but sexual experiences that were nightmarish. She was experimenting with drugs. She was not sure about her sexuality. So she was dabbling with men and women. And I knew all about these things. I knew when she snuck out of the house and did ecstasy. I knew when she was sleeping with a woman versus a man. I knew when she was a boiling kettle ready to blow because she hated herself and what she saw in the mirror. And I was going to bear the brunt of that if I pushed too much. So it was just insanity in a way in my home. But then we would go to school and we were great in school and we were pretty and we were popular and it was really confusing. And I would overshare because my mom overshared. So I would tell everybody everything. I know now that that's what Brene Brown calls hot wiring intimacy. All right. So I wanted you to see me and love me. And what happened in response was everybody talked shit about me. So I was the girl in school who was the slut and the lesbian. And, I was feared, I was hated, I was admired. And I just felt tortured inside because my defense mechanism was hold your chin up, act like you're fine, get the straight A, be beautiful, be thin. And then when you get home, whatever your mother says might as well be God because it is the truth. Dad's not around. That's all you got. So by the time I went away to college, it was just like, I could watch out, because whoever said you gain 15 pounds when you go away to college, I'll be the one to lose it. Whoever said you flunk out of your first semester, I'll show you how to get straight A's. Watch me. So it was a watch how well I will please and perform and show you wrong. It was a real survival skill, and on the outside, it made me look like $1,000,000. I came back from school, first semester, winter break, thin, beautiful, and doing better than 99% of my peers academically. My mother was so proud of me. And of course, I was a shell of myself. I mean, I have absolutely no sense of who I was. Zero. And, this is an interesting part of my growing up. I mean, how old are we when we go to college, where we're still so young? I was choosing a major that felt broad enough for me to fit into. What I really wanted to do was get a record deal, be a star, and go on tour. Or at the very least, I wanted to be a celebrity choreographer, dance first, singing second. Those were my love languages. Those were my escape. I had done them since I was 4. There were very few things I did growing up in the sports or performing world that I loved. Mostly I did things because I thought I was supposed to, or to win the approval of somebody else. For example, in high school, I joined the swim team. I was an average swimmer, but my coach loved the elite swimmers. And I thought, how am I going to get on his radar? Well, I don't know that I'm going from average to elite anytime soon, but there's this diving component to the swim team. And I was a gymnast. And I thought, I can swim. I can do gymnastics. This seems like a natural fit. I told him, do you need another diver? And he got so excited. So what did I do? For 2 years, I took professional diving lessons at St. John's University. I mean, I'm talking about the 10-meter board. I fucking hated it. I dreaded it in my bones. But I did it anyway because I wanted my coach to love me. I wanted to be the best. So I was already, going to college, picking a degree that I didn't care about for other people. I had really figured out the formula of how to present like I was okay.
Yeah. And I think so many people, I mean, obviously you had an idealistic childhood. I don't see anything wrong here. So, I mean, I look at this and I hear, oh my God, abandonment and emotional enmeshment and probably God knows what else in terms of neglect. And then, by the nature of our human experience, what do we do under these dire, chaotic circumstances as children? We move to these survival mechanisms, right? And for me, which I actually resonate tremendously with, like I learned how to become a chameleon. My superpower, I read people better than anyone I know. And that came from growing up in such an abusive household. Like I needed to be able to read people for my safety immediately. And so I know when somebody's full of shit within like 10 seconds. I mean, it literally is a superpower. But before I recognized how to be me, I spent all my time being what everyone else wanted me to be. Super codependent as a kid, super violent as a kid. I spent a lot of my childhood trying to do things to get people to like me because nobody liked me in my home. My mom popped pills. At one point, I think we were 12, she literally disappeared and nobody knew where she went. And this was an interesting time when you could go down to Florida and get prescription drugs. And turns out she went to Florida and married some dude when she was already married in Indiana. It was like this whole thing. And, I grew up with a super abusive stepfather and a crazy alcoholic, racist grandma. And you look at these experiences and it's like children will do what they have to do to survive. And so this idea about self-abandonment that you mentioned, like it's even beyond that. You turn off, you go on autopilot, and then God forbid if you got a B, I'm sure your soul
Oh
was
God,
crushed,
yes.
right? God forbid you don't get first place, right? And so what I'm really curious about, you talked about that word being boundaryless growing up, but it feels to me like in some capacity, and maybe this is, I'm a contrarian, right? So I will typically go against whatever anyone ever tells me because that's why. I'm wondering if because of the chaos of your home is maybe that there is, you're rebuking that as like, I'm going to go be a high performer. Like, was it just approval seeking, or was it like, actually, I'm going to go be great?
Definitely by the time I went to college, there was so much pent up resentment about how desperately I wanted to be seen and loved and understood in high school with my peers, and how horribly that turned out. And I can give a few crazy examples of that once I went away to college, I was like, all of you. It was definitely like a fuck you to my peers to be like, I'm going to show all you people. You can try to tear me down. Blah, 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 blah. As far as my family unit, though, it was really approval seeking. It was really, this is how I continue to stay safe and loved in the world, and particularly by my mother. So, however, boy, did that take a turn. And if I go a year or two into the story of Boston University, we will see how this desire to be perfect for others imploded, but also how I would not put that coping skill down for more than a decade after that.
I want to come into that,
Okay.
just not yet, because there's a question I have that I was very, very curious about, because when I was researching you, I kept thinking to myself, there must have been this moment that she disappeared, and I was wondering, like, A, what did that look like? And B, how did, like, I want to frame this the right way. When I was 12 years old, my grandmother found out I had been living in an abandoned house for 6 weeks by myself, 12 years old. Because again, my mom had disappeared to Florida on a drug binge, blah, blah. She came and took me. I'm clearly brown. I am biracial, black and white. My grandmother is about as racist as the day is long. I mean, we had a copy of Hitler's autobiography, Mein Kampf, on our kitchen table. She was a complete psychopath. And I had just hit this emotional break. Like, I had broken as a human being, even at that young of an age. And I just started getting high all the time. I mean, weed, pills, drinking by 13. And then when sex came into play, oh my God, that's a whole nother story we need 5 hours to talk about. But I'm curious for you, where did addiction start young for you? I know that's a huge part of your story. We're going to get into it. But do you remember the first time, like the first time I got high was literally the sun was brighter, the sky was bluer, the birds were chirpier. Everything was better than it had ever been in my entire life. And, they talk about chasing the dragon, and, part of that's seeking dopamine and things of that nature we'll talk about later. But did you have a similar experience? And what was the first time and instance where it was like drugs, alcohol, sex came into your life and it made you feel
Honestly, I dabbled a lot until my early 20s, and then it took off. It was a staple in my daily life. So
Do you remember how old you were the first time?
I mean, I was sneaking out to Sound Factory. If anybody knows New York City nightclubs back in the 90s and 2000s, that was like the club to go to. And I would be 14, 15 with a fake ID getting in and dropping ecstasy. And that was when ecstasy was so good, buying it off of creepy strangers in the club. And I would dance for 6 hours straight and be in seventh heaven. It was unbelievable to me because I already felt joyous when I danced. So you add some ecstasy to that and the freedom to just be who I was, where I was, doing what I wanted to do. But then I would come home and I would just straighten up. It was a thing on the side. I did not go into chasing the dragon moment for several more years. And in hindsight, having written my book and the work that's required to sit down and confront all your in that way, I really think I understand now the impetus, the thing that happened in my life that catalyzed my addiction to something that went from every now and then to forever. You and me forever, kid. And I can get to that and I can speak to that. I would never have known, even 2 years ago, why at that time did it take off the way that it did? Because things were so hard for so long. I could have jumped on that addiction train way sooner and been off and running by the time I was 16, 17, 18, like some people are. But I didn't. I was able to stay highly controlled. And I thought, without question, this was just a thing I could experiment with when I wanted to, and then put it down and go be that straight A student and get the praise and adoration of my mother.
Yeah. And that works until it doesn't, by the way. Like, I don't know if this is your experience, but for me, it was like, no, I can keep hooking up with all these girls. No, I can keep going out with my friends on Coke nights. No, I can keep doing all this alcohol. It's fine. And then one day it's not fine anymore. Where you mentioned, actually, I'm going to go back real quick. Addiction, I have come to find, is not something that is controllable. And I used to sit and look at my mother. Her bedroom floor would be covered in those little orange pill bottles. I mean, she didn't pay our rent. She didn't pay our electricity. We get evicted all the time. I lived with like 30 different families between 8 to 12 years old because she was always chasing that thing. She got married like 6 times. It was crazy. But my grandmother was an addict too. And so was my father and my stepfather and all of the generations of my family from as far back as we can look. And I remember these moments I would look at, and I'm a child, so I don't know better, by the way. Like, I really want to context this. I would look at my mother. I'd be like, you are a coward. You are a loser. I am disgusted with you. You should be full of shame. And again, I'm 12. I don't know what's happening. I have no rational understanding of the pain that she's probably in. And I have this very concise moment where at 18 years old, I said, I will never talk to you again. And till the day she died, I didn't. It's probably the greatest decision I've ever made. But what I've come to understand for myself, through education, through my own journey, through looking at my family, like addiction is often labeled as this thing where it's like, you control this, you're making a choice, make a different choice. But on the other hand, I would be willing to bet that the addiction in your family goes probably beyond your mother generationally. And so, and whatever addiction your father had with money and gambling, things of that nature, could you tell that something was wrong as a child? And do you think that you stepped into addiction because that becomes a question about nature versus nurture?
Yeah. I mean, also, I should say my dad, I think, absolutely was an untreated addict as well. He was also the family enabler. So when my mom's doctors would say, we're cutting you off from this prescription, she said to my father, who did anything she wanted, you better get this medicine in your name and give it to me. And he did. And he continued to be,
Intense.
until the day he died, the drug dealer of the family for my mother and my sister. I think the level of mental illness, addiction, emotional cycles of dysfunction goes so far back in my ancestral heritage. The second part, can you ask that again?
Yeah, I was asking you if generationally that you see addiction in the family. And then the other part of it was like, really, did you notice, did it feel like that was off? Like it was wrong? Like it was different? Like to me, it was so normal. When I went to people's houses and their parents weren't passed out drunk and high, I thought that was weird.
I mean, with the exception of that memory, when I asked my mom, why do you take those pills? Because clearly it didn't feel normal or right to me in that moment, or I wouldn't have asked it. After that, oh yeah, totally normal. In fact, by the time I left BU, so we'll get to what happened there, I came back, I lived with my mother for a year. That was nightmarish. That was the beginning of my addiction, full speed ahead. And me going, Mom, for what you said and what you told me that I shouldn't have known and what you think I should do with my life. And my father became my buddy, my drug dealer, my drinking partner. And that felt maybe not normal, but I didn't care at all. I loved it. He was co-signing my addiction, right? So I think for the most part, with the exception of that first moment when I questioned things, yeah, it was pretty normal for me. When I went away to college, it was the first time, because I was out of New York, I was out of the house, that I kind of felt like I zoomed out of my own life and went, what the hell just happened in that house? What have I been told? Where has my father been? Why didn't he say anything? I needed him. Is what my mother said true? Aren't there two sides to the story? Wait a second. I was starting to go, huh? So that by the time I came back and ended up living with her, it was like the claws were out because her precious, brilliant daughter was now not in university. She was not in college. And she was fighting back. My mother was so devastated, so disappointed. Of course, I felt shame about that. But in response to it, it was just one giant rebellion. And that's really when guess what, Mom? I'm not living in this apartment in Long Island. I'm going to move to Manhattan. I'm going to be a star. And I don't need your help. Bye. So I did. I moved to Manhattan. And that's when I became a bartender. So hello. What a
Yeah, I mean, standard story.
Absolutely.
I mean, this all adds up.
Absolutely.
It's like, because what do you do? Like, I sought chaos in, I guess, really in the same controlled ways, because I was a high performer. I worked for a Fortune 10 company when I was 20 years old. I made more money than everyone I knew. I crushed it in business. But, my family are in prison and my friends were getting murdered, and my life was just so nuts that I would go to work, destroy it at work, right, in a good way, and then come home and destroy my life in a bad way. And I think that's a really interesting dichotomy for high functioning, high performing, not only addicts, but trauma survivors. Like when my clients say to me, I thrive in chaos, I always say that's the thing I've ever heard. Because our bodies are the somatic experience that we have to like seek chaos for normality, like that destroys you. So it's no surprise to me, like you're now like, okay, now I'm going to go on this path of self-destruction. Some of it's
Exactly.
subconscious too, by the way. You don't even
Exactly.
know you're doing it, right? And you're like, why do I ruin every relationship? Why do I cheat? Why am I doing all these drugs? Why am I in debt making $250 a year? And you're like, wait a second. So you moved to New York City, you're a bartender. Now, is this where things go bad
Oh
for
yeah,
worse?
but let me just tell you what happened and why I left BU. Right? So
Okay, yes,
I'm in my
please.
second year. By the way, I also fell head over heels in love with a guy. And my idea of love was you make this work at any cost. Any cost. I fell in love with a guy who didn't believe in monogamy. Ha ha. I'll make you love me. Just watch. So that was happening. And I was squeezing and bending until I broke to just be okay with an open relationship as I was just face down in a pit of, I love this guy's, his brain, the way he saw the world. He was such a breath of fresh air compared to the closed-minded I had grown up with. It felt like I needed that as badly as the air that I breathe. So I was going to make it work. And at the same time, I got this one teacher in this writing class, and I loved to write. I was a good writer. He would not give me anything other than a C. And I was unraveling. Just like my swim teacher. How am I going to make this guy love me? How am I going to make this man that I'm falling in love with love me? How am I going to make this professor that's giving me a C give me an A? Game plan. So I had to write a book review. American Beauty had been out for a little bit. I loved that movie. And I did some research on book reviews for American Beauty. Came across this incredible book review, used a bunch of the sentences from the review, did not cite my sources, handed in my paper, got it back with a big red 0 and a see me after class. What that turned into was he had stapled on the back of the paper the review that I plagiarized from and said, this piece of writing was so much better than your other pieces of writing that I immediately knew something was up. And all I did was go online, punch in some of the sentences, and here's the review. You plagiarized. I'm submitting this to the academic committee. They will have a meeting and they will decide what happens. Can you imagine that phone call to my mother? And at the same time, I cannot get this man to commit to me. I know when we've been spending more and more time together. I know he really cares about me. And then all of a sudden he disappears and he's not around for 1 or 2 nights. And I know he's literally with somebody else. So I'm just coming undone at Boston University. My mom was dating an alcoholic. She had separated from my father by now. They moved out of the house. Now the kids were out of the house. So now they could separate. Because now it was okay, right?
Yeah, normal.
It was much better to have them in the same house.
Yeah, now it's acceptable.
But they were legally still married. By the way, till the day my father died, they stayed legally married, which the enmeshment and the
That's so wild to
codependency
me.
and literally the sickness of that dependency was so insane to witness in the last couple of decades of my life, especially as I was getting sober and getting well. And the way it made my father come undone. And I actually believe in some ways, and we can get to this later, that all of this untreated emotional codependency inside of my dad is part of what triggered this rare autoimmune disorder that he came down with that shouldn't have killed him, that he died over. Okay. So I like literally think my dad died from not treating his emotional body, his spirit.
Yeah. Well, I think Bessel van der Kolk would
And
actually
Gabor,
support
I think
that.
he might,
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And me, for that matter. You too.
So
Makes sense.
I got to tell this to my mother, but with the guy, he was 2 years older than me. So I was a sophomore. I'm about to have this hearing with the committee. My mom's dating this alcoholic guy living in Long Island and tells this guy, oh my God, Samantha, plagiarize. What are we gonna do? The guy comes on the phone. Bill. Ironically, his name is Bill. He's an alcoholic. For anyone in 12-step programs, you'll understand that joke. He was like, Samantha, listen, we're gonna make a case. You are a good kid. You didn't mean to do this. We're gonna let them know how good you are. This is not gonna be a big deal. Don't worry, we're gonna figure it out. So my mom kind of rested her little head on Bill's plan. Bill came up with a big script. He was a lawyer, big dissertation for me to present in front of the committee. And I was terrified because I just wanted to go in and say, I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I actually really love learning, and I'm not a cheater in my bones. That's never, ever how I approach. But no, you will follow the script line by line. So I studied it and studied it. The same time, the guy I was madly in love with, who swore, we had made an agreement, you know what? We're spending so much time together. We're having sex without a condom. It's kind of reckless. Let's make sure we're not sleeping with other people at the same time. Let's at least make that commitment. Okay, cool. We made that commitment. Within a matter of weeks, I found out these two things. Number one, he had been without a condom. The one girl that I knew he loved and had a history with besides me. And that wrecked me. And the committee at Boston University said, we're not going to expel you. That'll be on your permanent record. But we're going to suspend you for 18 months. At which time, if you want to come back, you can. Bye-bye. That would mean I would come back as a junior, and all my friends would be in their last semester of their senior year. No fucking way. I will not step foot on that campus again. The shame of that, of having to report that to my mother. They didn't give up about the dissertation that I read. Bye-bye. Because it wasn't honest. It wasn't sincere.
Hey, Unbroken Nation, we'll be right back to the show, but I wanted to let you know that you can grab a copy of my first book, Think Unbroken, Understanding and Overcoming Childhood Trauma, for free. If you go to book.thinkunbroken.com, you can download the PDF ebook version of the book and get everything that I know about the baseline of healing trauma for free, downloaded to your email right now. Just go to book.thinkunbroken.com to download your copy of Think Unbroken, Understanding and Overcoming Childhood Trauma for a PDF for your phone. Again, that is book.thinkunbroken.com.
You know what? I was literally just thinking to myself, I wonder what would have happened if she would have walked in there and simply said, I'm trying my best. I was doing anything to make this class work. I don't know if this teacher has a vendetta against me. I was just trying to
Do you know
get
what, though?
through this. And if you would humanize
that
yourself,
would have required that would have
made too much
required
sense.
me to trust myself,
Yeah, which we
which
are going
I
to get into.
did not know how to do.
You can't know how to.
Exactly.
You've never been allowed to. This is the thing people really don't. This is the one thing I am trying to help people understand. This is the reason I started this show and write the books and speak on the stages. It's like you can learn how to
Exactly.
trust yourself. Your life will change so fast, but that takes time, and it takes building.
Hi, I'm Sean Nelson, founder and CEO of Lovesac and host of the Let Me Save You 25 Years podcast. Imagine learning from the best without the years of struggle. On my podcast, I sit down with stars like Montel Jordan and Sarah Blakely to share the hard-earned lessons that can save you time and effort on your path to success. Ready to speed up your success story? Listen to Let Me Save You 25 Years with Sean Nelson wherever you get your podcasts.
The Labor Day weekend sale is on at Tanger Outlets. Score up to 70% off at top brands like Nike Factory Store, Crocs, J. Crew Factory, Gap Outlet, and so many more. Refresh your wardrobe with the latest arrivals for less from all your favorite brands this Labor Day weekend. Tanger Outlets, always on trend, always on sale. Plan your trip at Tanger.com.
Confidence through these small incremental steps and learning how to trust your gut and showing up for yourself and doing hard shit. But you kind of have to have a couple rock bottoms or 100
Yep.
before that takes place. And so, this moment, I mean, it's so predictable, right, Samantha? And it's a weird thing to say because I can sit down and if you tell me your childhood, I'll tell you your future, like unequivocally. And I sit and I go, yep, this adds up, this adds up, this adds up. But what I kind of feel coming here, right, is a little bit more chaos. You're not done yet. Cause I know the people are cutting my clock, right? And so I'm like, where's the real shit?
Oh yeah,
Let's
yeah,
get into
yeah.
the
I mean,
real shit
here's what the next chunk looks like. I move out and I become a bartender in Manhattan. And now I'm going to be a star. So I'm auditioning. I end up meeting this guy at the Jersey Shore. He becomes my boyfriend. Eventually he moves in with me. So both of us are two young fools running around Manhattan. And when I'm not trying to be a star, bartending, we're going to swingers clubs, we're doing drugs together, we're other people, but together we are just
You literally have the same adolescence.
We were
This is
just
hilarious.
out of our mind. And there was this one night coming, and the thing is, when you bartend, you're exposed to all of it. So eventually I would find the cocaine that somebody had. And I was like, surely this will be a thing I can control, obviously, like everything else. And as soon as I realized that I could do cocaine and drink a lot and then it would level me back out, lather, rinse, repeat, and I could just go all night, I was like, where's the cocaine? The truth is, the first time I did cocaine, it didn't do for me. But I was like, but everyone says it does. Like, I wanted to understand
But you're not a quitter.
what the buzz was about. So I did it until I had the desired effect. And then it became just a staple in my life. And there was this one night, after a long night at the bar, my boyfriend meets up with me. We go party at the after hours, whatever it is. We're doing cocaine until the sun comes up. We're out of our mind. There's no shot that we're ever going to fall asleep anytime soon. We're taking a cab as the sun is coming up and the mothers are strolling their babies in Central Park, right back to our rat-infested New York City tiny apartment. And he looks at me and he says, I never want to do this again. And in my mind, I said, well, that sucks because I'm just getting started. So for the next couple of years, him and I were living together. And I hid really, really terribly by the end, by the way. I was other people, a lot of women, by the way, because that was so normal to me. And I was like, that's not really cheating. Then I would break up with him for a little bit so I could f a bunch of guys and not feel bad about it. And then I would get back together with him. I was having my dad drive in and give me prescription medication anytime I wanted, so that when I got home at 4 a.m. and my boyfriend was fast asleep and I was raging and high off cocaine, I could douse myself with downers to try to slow my heart rate down and fall asleep, right? And then all the while, because I was still very tethered to academia, I wanted to get my undergrad degree. So I finished it up in communications at Fordham University. And my drinking and drugging was really a priority at this point. And the rejection I was getting from the entertainment industry was unpalatable to me. I mean, I had no inner canvas for resiliency. So I thought, well, maybe I'll be a trainer. Maybe I'll do something with exercise with the body. I was teaching dance. That was going well. But I was like, I don't know about this entertainment thing. Maybe I just need to figure out like the right degree for me. So I'm training. I meet this guy named Bobby. He's got 22 years sober from heroin addiction. He's cool as but I'm like, I don't want to be a trainer for the rest of my life and make $25 an hour. That's also not prestigious enough. And I remember having a roommate before I lived with my boyfriend, running around the city trying to figure out, how to survive and living with like 5 people in a 2-bedroom apartment, that kind of a thing. And this girl was getting her doctorate in physical therapy. And it was like a seed was planted. I'm like, oof, that sounds sexy as I could be a doctor. And I could have a degree that allows me to open my own business, work with athletes, like change what I want to do. Really versatile, very personable. It just felt like I could fit in that box. So if all else failed and I couldn't be a star, don't forget that, Sam. You could be a doctor. And so I decided to take a chance on physical therapy school, but I had none of the classes that you needed because I was just an artist. I was writing. I was doing creative writing classes. I got a random degree in communications that meant nothing to me. And I found out you needed basically a pre-med background to get into grad school. And I was like, holy like I hated science like the plague. So I just started to take one class at a time. I remember getting a 50 on my first physics test and was like, like, and then watch me go. I'm going to get the tutor. I'm going to get the 90. And it was like, once I decided, oh no, nobody's giving me a 50 or a C ever again. I'm way too smart for this. I'm going to be a doctor. F you. There it is again. F you. This is a surefire way to a stable life. So I ended up getting into graduate school. When I found out I got accepted into graduate school, I knew exactly how to celebrate. I called the one person I knew, not my dad, who partied as hard as I did. And I said, girl, call the Coke dealer. Game the on. The next day was Christmas Eve. My boyfriend was out of town, had the apartment to myself. We got an 8-ball. We started blowing lines at like 2 p.m. We hopped all around the city. If you've ever been to New York City in Christmas time, it's a razzle dazzle. Lights are twinkling. The little tents are out in Columbus Circle. You can get all these amazing things. So we had bags. We would go into the bar, have Corona, sniff some cocaine off the dirty bathroom stall, lather, rinse, repeat. Got back to the apartment at 7 p.m. I felt really fuzzy, like I had brain fog. And my friend, not really a friend, I had met her one other time, was in the Coke zone wrapping the gifts. And so it was like talking to a wall. Hey, I feel, you know what? I'm going to go in my room. I'm going to rest. We had this little tiny TV in our closet on the top shelf. So I reached up to get the remote. Next thing I remember, I'm on my side. And the girl, her name was Heidi, was standing right over me. And my gaze shifted vertical. And she looked horrified. And she was on the phone with 911 trying to explain my address. Meanwhile, she could have just walked outside. We were on the first story. She could have walked outside and literally seen the numbers, but she was too high to put that together. She didn't know where I lived because she didn't know me. And I knew right away something horrible happened. And I was like, get off the phone. The thought of going to a hospital, everyone finding out, the boyfriend who I was about to go visit in a couple days because it was Christmas time. I'm about to be a doctor. I just got accepted to, you get off the phone. You are not about to ruin my whole life. She got off the phone. I called a mutual friend to come over so everyone could calm the down, including me. Heidi left, and my friend Becca put me to bed that night. And the very next day, I went to Staten Island to meet up with my family, my sister and her then husband, my sister, also an addict, super high functioning at that point. I had leftover cocaine from the night before. Obviously, I wasn't going to throw it out. That would be really. I brought it with me. I took the Staten Island ferry. I didn't know they had drug sniffing dogs. I don't know why or how those dogs didn't smell the cocaine, but I got onto the ferry. I was like, this is the end of me. This is it. I'm going to jail. It's over. I got on the ferry. And I looked at my sister when I got there and shot her a look of, we got to talk. Like, something happened. I need to tell somebody. She was the only person I told in those next few days. And we went up to the bathroom. I showed her the cocaine. I told her what happened. I had a big cut across my chin that was covered up in foundation. She said, Sammy, you just did too much. Here. And she scooped some on her nail. And I did it the next day. And then I realized, ooh, maybe I'm losing control. Maybe of this thing. Only this thing, cocaine. I remember that guy, Bobby, who was 22 years sober. I never knew anybody that was sober except for him. So I called Bobby, told him what happened. It was a way to offload my shame. And he was like, want to go to a meeting? I mean, no, but okay. Sat in the back of a 12-step meeting and was like, oh, hell no. You religious, culty, with this patriarchal, antiquated language. I don't look like you. I am smarter than you. I am in way more control of my life and my using. Like, absolutely not. So I didn't go back to the meeting for a year and a half.
Samantha, I want to pause you here. And here's why. One, I mean, that's a lot, right? But I hear that and I'm sitting here. You probably saw me smirking a couple of times. I'm like, check that box, check that box, check that box. I've been there. What we will do to find chaos in our lives to feel normal when we come from such traumatic backgrounds is insane. When I was 25, 26, I'm sitting here looking at my life. I'm making 200, 250 a year. And this is 15 years ago. That's like $500,000 today. I made more money than all my friends. I had a smoking hot girlfriend. I lived in the best city. It was literally titled the best city in America. Had my dream car, but I'm 350 pounds. I'm smoking 2 packs a day, drinking myself to sleep. I'm cheating on this girl. God knows how many times. And with all due respect, what the was wrong with her to stay with a guy like me? And then, obviously I know looking back, and then, my family wouldn't talk to me. I'm $50,000 in debt, dodging creditors, phone calls and not emails, but physical mail. I'm making 250 grand a year. Right. And then it's not enough. It's not enough. It's hooking up with the next person and the next person, and the next person, the cheating, it's the drugs, it's the alcohol. What I needed, and it's funny because I was on a podcast as a guest yesterday, and this guy asked me, and nobody had really asked me this before. He said, what did you really need when you were in all that chaos? What I needed is, I think, the thing that neither of us have, which a lot of people didn't get, which they desperately need in those moments. They need someone to smack them in the face and say, do you not see what you're doing? Because I think awakenings really only come with awareness. Because here's the problem that I ran into. You talk about enablers. All of my friends were doing the same. All of my friends were doing the same. My friends were fat. My friends were making a ton of money, smoking a bunch of cigarettes. Now, some of them were married and faithful, sure, but the majority of them are around on their girlfriends. Right. We're all getting, because we were young. We were young in corporate America, and, we're cashing checks for 15 grand a month, and we're getting limousines and going to the underground nightclub and doing cocaine on the way there. I will say this. I've never done cocaine, by the way, because I know I'm on my third coffee today. I know that if I did cocaine, I would be under a bridge right now. My drug of choice had always been women, period. That was always my drug of choice. And that comes, from having a crazy drug addict mother and all the other things that we won't get into right now. But the thing that I always tied back to was like, man, I just needed somebody to be like, don't you see this? Instead of the people who are like, hey man, it's all good. You just had a hard night. Maybe don't drink a fifth tonight. My thing was, and this is insane, we would go to the bars, we would get VIP because that's what you do. We'd roll up in a limo, dressed to the nines, young business owner. Though this wasn't every night, but it was a lot. Normally we went and got beers at lunch. This is when I realized, and I'll say this, I've never believed myself to be an alcoholic. Even to this day, I don't think that. I just was so independent. I would do anything anybody wanted. And so my buddies and I, we would go have these crazy nights. And this is when Red Bull became a thing. Red Bull really hit the scene in the middle. I'm 21, Red Bull was a thing. So you talk about cocaine, I'm sure it's close. We would smash 2-3 Red Bulls, got Red Bull vodkas, Jaeger bombs, the whole night. This, you were a bartender. I ran a bar for a while, of course, go figure. So I'm running this cocktail bar when I'm 25. On top of running my own business, on top of working at the Fortune 10 company, because I'm like a workaholic psychopath. And it was just every day was one more level more intense than the day before. It was just one more level, one more level, one more level. And my rock bottom came because here I am. On paper, you would look at my life and be like, this kid is a homeless kid, no high school diploma, no college education, making $1 million by the time he's 25, smoking hot girlfriend, best car, best neighborhood, literally in the country, according to Forbes, is good. And I'm Like I'm so beyond it's not funny. And I hit my rock bottom wasn't killing someone. My rock bottom wasn't getting busted cheating. She knew people are not stupid, right? My rock bottom wasn't even the fact that I'm 50 grand in debt. My rock bottom was I called my little brother who had gone do multiple tours in the Middle East, had gotten blown up, had just been in a hell of a situation. Luckily, he was fine, didn't lose any limbs, maybe lost a couple of years off his life from the stress, but he had been back home for months. I did not call him, did not text him, did not come and see him, nothing. And one day, because this is what we do. I'm going to get my life together. I'm going to fix this. I'm going to the gym. I'm not getting drunk tonight. I'm not going to cheat on my girlfriend. And, like 72 hours goes by. And so I call my little brother and I go, hey man, how you doing? What's up? And you can hear the vitriol in his voice. He goes, what do you want? I go, hey man, we just haven't talked for a while. How are you? What's going on? He goes, you're not my brother. Never talk to me again. And that was the moment where I was like, I have to change this. And so what I needed in that moment, as painful as that was, I literally needed my little brother to be like, go f yourself. And to have, for the first time, this really hard gut check moment of like, this is the life that you created. Was it Bobby that gave you that moment?
No.
Tell me about that.
Oh, so much just came up for me when you were talking about that. As somebody whose default to feel good about themselves is to fix and save everybody else, straddling the tension between my inherent desire, especially from where I sit today, to intervene in that way, in that harsh, honest way, when someone I love is sick and harming themselves, to say, wake the f up. What are you doing? Which, by the way, I tried to do many, 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 many times with my sister. And going, are you doing, again, what you've always done? And can you stand down? Because really, no amount of anyone doing that to you made you stop. And maybe an act of healing for me is to not do that, because that's what I always do. So that's a real like, woo, that's a moment for me. And I'm still working on that today. I just got into it with my husband before we got on this call,
Sure.
And I'm open to suggestions. And I said, no, you're not. Anytime I suggest anything to you, you don't want to hear it. You are the only one in my life who doesn't want my advice, even though I have so many good things to offer. You don't want any of it. So don't say you're open to a suggestion unless you really are, right? I've had to learn not to do that. Bobby took me to a meeting. I never went back for a year and a half. My dad kept providing prescription pills. I cut and paste my using. I realized, no matter what, I keep finding my way to cocaine. So I'm really just going to go heavy on the downers. I'm going to smoke weed every single day. I'm going to take these Xanax and Ambien and whatever. Eventually, the guy I was with found the pill bottle and he looked at me with disgust in his eyes. You're still doing this? I knew he was on his way out. And the idea of him leaving, the only proof really I had left that I was worth anything at all, was unimaginable to me. So I called Bobby again. Went to a meeting again, this time because I really felt like I didn't know. I was I didn't want to stop using. It really wasn't bottom, but this guy was going to leave. And that was like so scary to me. So it lit a fire under my ass that I had to do something. Bobby was the only person I believed. I hated the language of the steps. I hated going to meetings, all of it. I hated raising my hand. I followed Bobby around the city for the next year. I let him sponsor me. He bum rushed me through the steps. He knew I hated God. But I loved him. I believed him, but I was really white knuckling mostly everything. By this time, I'm in graduate school. I have this opportunity to go to California for 8 weeks for one of my clinical rotations. My then boyfriend, who was staying with me by a string, was thinking about moving to California. And I was like, I need to do anything he wants to do. Like, I no longer get a say in any of this. I've been such a horrible piece of shit. So let me just go do this clinical thing out in California and see if I like it, because then maybe we can move there when I get my degree. I say to Bobby starts acting weird towards the end of that first year before I go to LA. Different. I couldn't put my finger on it. And I said, I don't know what's going on with you, but we were friends before anything else. I don't want our friendship to be compromised. I'm going to get a temporary sponsor in California and let's just be friends. I want to call him. I'm out in California. Amazing things are happening with dance. My clinical rotation was like the toughest experience of my life. I hated my clinical instructor. He was so hard on me. I never, ever got a pat on the back for anything. I would show up and hold it together. I'd come back and cry, but all the dance stuff, the choreography stuff, the doors were opening. So I wanted to tell Bobby about it. And he never picked up his phone, ever. Finally, his wife picked up about 4 weeks in and she said, Bobby relapsed. That's why you haven't heard from him. Maybe you can see him when you get back. What? Like, what are you talking about? That makes absolutely no sense. 22 years sober, brightest light you could imagine, just an aura around him. The person that will extend his hand to any newcomer, anyone who's suffering. And any street I would walk down, by the way, in Manhattan, didn't matter what route I took ever, Bobby was there. Hey, kid. I mean, he grew up in Hell's Kitchen. He was Manhattan to me, right? He was sobriety to me. He was hope to me. Maybe you can see him when you go back to New York. Couldn't wait to get back. First person I met up with was Bobby. Tried to look him in the face. What the happened, Bobby? Did you relapse? Because I knew he wasn't happy in his marriage. Maybe his wife was lying. I don't know. Couldn't look me in the eye. I had a shoulder surgery. I got a staph infection. He had a sling on his arm. They gave me oxy. I want to kill Heather. I'm so miserable in this marriage. Bobby, I don't understand. Did you relapse or not? Nothing. Just like the look in my mother's eyes when she would take those pills. Empty. A shell of who he was. I was really frightened to be near him. He hired me out of desperation and loneliness a couple weeks later to help him clean his apartment. See, I was about to be a PT and he was in a sling. So he thought, I'll get Sam to keep me company. I'll pay her a couple, $20-$40, clean my apartment and take my laundry basket to the laundromat on 8th Avenue. So I did that. So uncomfortable. I was so uncomfortable. I don't even remember what we talked about. But I remember thinking, I can't do this again. Like I don't know what is going on, but I need some space from this because I was so spooked by it. 2 weeks later, my friend in recovery, who had a lot more time than I did, called me. She said, where are you right now? I was in my apartment. Don't go anywhere. I'm coming over. Okay, well, so now I was scared. So she comes over, she sits me down on the couch, puts her hand on my forearm. She looks me in the eye and she says, Bobby is dead. He jumped out of his 8th-story window onto 52nd Street. Was that my bottom? No. Nope. My bottom wasn't my overdose. My bottom wasn't getting suspended from university. My bottom wasn't Bobby's suicide. What I learned in that moment is that addiction is out for blood and it doesn't discriminate and it doesn't care if I have 50 days or 50 years. And if I ever decide to relapse, to use, I'm dead. At that point, I was about to be a doctor, for God's sakes. I didn't want to die, but I did not know how to live. We moved to California, that boyfriend and I. He became my fiance. He became my husband. I thought we had made it through all the madness, the sick addict and the sick enabler. We finally made it. I'm sober now. We're going to be okay. Proof that I'm not a piece of shit after all. And then he's just disappearing. We're living in California. I don't know anybody. I'm a brand new PT. I have so much anxiety going into work. I'm a new clinician. He was all I knew, and he was disappearing. He was hanging out with friends all the time. He was in banking at the time. I have a business trip. I got to go here. I got to go there. His ring, his wedding ring, would be on the nightstand. That's odd. Why would he need to take his ring off? The fighting between us was so constant and so often because as he pulled away emotionally, physically, we weren't sharing finances. We didn't talk about that before we got married. I just assumed we would. He kept everything separate. He was rejecting me sexually. I mean, he was like my dad, absent. And the more he pulled away, the more I did what I know how to do. I'm going to get my fucking claws around you. I'm going to control this. I'm going to make this right. I'm going to make you love me again and forgive me. When I tell you that what that turned into, besides daily fighting, me just in a rage, just punching my arms and legs through the wall of this house we were renting in LA, fighting so much that one day I called him up about something and he got in my face. He never got in my face. We were never physically fighting ever. Verbally though. So he got in my face. I could feel his hot breath. Don't you call me ever again. And in that moment, I was like, if I don't get out of this house, I'm going to die. One way or the other. Like I'm going to relapse and die. My spirit's going to die. This might turn physical. Like it scared me. That still wasn't bottom, but I was on my way. I slept on a friend's couch for 2 nights. She was a mutual friend. I don't want to be in the middle. I'm sorry. You have to find somewhere else to stay. I had this other sponsor named Shelly. She had a room for rent in her apartment in this seedy part of LA. Perfect. Rented the room. She pressed God down my throat until I was suffocating. God will solve your problems. F you. I'm going to solve my problem. There is no such thing as God. F you and your God. We fought like I fought with my mother that year that I was off from Boston University. Miserable. She would sneak around and look at my room when I wasn't there. Everything would be moved around. So after a month of that, I found another place to stay in a friend's house. Mostly she wasn't there. It was a 1-bedroom apartment. She had a boyfriend, but when she was, I would sleep on the air mattress and her cat would piss on me in the middle of the night. And I would wake up and think, what the is my life right now? And finally, when that was running out of time and she was like, yeah, we need to wrap this thing up. I think I stayed at her place for 3 months. I went to New York, visit family, called Rob, my then husband, right? Begging him, can I come back now? Are we good now? I don't know. I don't think we're ready. Like this just doesn't make sense to come back. Sobbing. What do you mean? What do you expect me to do? We're married for God's sakes. I'm homeless. I'm sleeping on people's couch. Like, what do you... Called a sober friend. My sober friend said, like your brother, my sober friend said, Samantha, listen to me right now. If you are not ready to leave your marriage, you cannot live like this. This is insanity. You got to get a place, sign a lease, and heal. And so I did. That day that I signed a lease for 6 months was when everything was gone. I was bottomed out. Because the one thing I had left that was proof that I was good was gone. It was him. It was gone. It was an unfurnished apartment. I had an air mattress on the floor. I laid on my back. I looked up at the ceiling and I sobbed. So 5 years into recovery, I had hit spiritual bankruptcy.
The universe will always support you.
Ain't that the truth?
You know, it's like, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but you got to pay your taxes. This is like the thing that I comes to mind. It's karmic debt in some capacity. It's the universe must balance itself. You have to, atone's a strong word in consideration of the conversation, but like, you got to pay your taxes. You are going to have to clean up your mess and clean up your life and clean up your and make amends and solve your problems and forgive yourself and go down this path of healing and just rinse and repeat that for the rest of your life. And what's really fascinating is it's just about a decision. That's all it is. This is the thing people don't understand. It's like they're expecting this miracle moment. The universe the whole time was like smacking you in the face and being like, aren't you paying attention? Aren't you paying attention? And then the moment that you actually pay attention, that's where you really realize how bad it is. But what's so amazing about that realization is like, that's where the growth comes. That is the only place in which this process and journey actually begins, an acknowledgement. Because we like to pretend, oh no, it's okay. It doesn't matter. It's not that big of a deal, but I'm still successful over here, but I did that over there, but I swear I'm going to be better. I'll be different. And then it's like, no, nothing changes until you change. Sorry. Hate to break it to you. There's no miracle. There's no knock at your door, someone begging you to do something different because you're not going to pay attention anyway. It is all about you standing in front of you. Life is, you'll get this as someone's right. Life is literary. It is a you versus you narrative. And you can be the villain, the victim, or the victor. It's up to you. I've been all three. I promise you, the latter is the best. It's amazing. But becoming you is the hardest thing that you will ever do. Then I think you have to get kicked in the face. I think you have to get knocked down. I think you have to have people leave you. I think that you have to have these moments, and I hate to say it, you've got to hit the bottom because it's not bad enough yet. And not until it becomes bad enough do you do anything different. And I wish that wasn't the truth. I wish that I could just sit here and tell you, you listen to the podcast and your life's going to be better, but it's not. I promise you, you're probably even wasting your time listening to the podcast. Go and take action. Get the lease, leave the relationship, go to the other side of the world. I don't give a sell everything that you own. Do whatever it takes. And it's because when you do that, that's where your life really begins. Unfortunately, we are out of time because I need another hour with you minimum because we're just getting the ball rolling here. But I want people to have the opportunity to connect with you. We obviously will have you back because I want to go into depth.
There's a big part two
here begging to happen. Yes, begging to happen. But it was so important to me to create this level of context because as I sit here and I feel a reflection of your experience and mine, what I love is that it's not just me being like, I lived all this and so can you, right? I get to have you here too, two entirely different backgrounds, yet massive similarities who have been able to navigate this journey. And sometimes I just think to myself, it's not just my voice that people need to hear. And so first, because I know the story and I want people to go get this book. I want people to connect with you. I want people to take the next steps with you. Tell everyone first and foremost where they can find you, about the book, and what you do to help people.
My social media handle and my website is Dr. Samantha Harte, Harte, and it's DR, not the full word doctor. And I'm super active on Instagram, and my website shows just all the different ways I'm doing work in the world. The book came out on June 10th. It's called Breaking the Circuit: How to Rewire Your Mind for Hope, Resilience, and Joy in the Face of Trauma. By the way, trauma, for the people who are like, I didn't have that much trauma. I can't even remember. My childhood was pretty idyllic. Trauma is a break, a severing from your self, capital S self, your highest self. Any experience that separates you from your knowing, from your gut, by the way. And it's a modern trauma-informed reinvention of the 12 steps, which at that rock bottom moment in that apartment, the right person came in and that's what we did with them. And for the last decade, that's what I've been doing with those steps, is making them apply to the situation I was in, making them land in my nervous system in a way that feels safe. And I wanted to do that for other people, not just in the rooms of recovery, but everywhere for everyone, whether you're an addict or not, because let's be real, we are suffering big time. Whether it's from perfectionism, which is really the thing that almost killed me. Productivity, thinness, martyrdom, rage, denial. We are all suffering and we don't know what to do with it. And I'm not interested in self-care. My work, I coach people one-on-one. I have an online community. I'm going to give you a link for people to sign up for that, to give me their information. I'm also doing a book giveaway. So the first 10 people that sign up on the link to be part of the Cycle Breaker community, where there's workouts, there's emotionally intelligent conversations, there's practical application of the 12 steps, there's everything. The first 10 people that fill out the form will get a signed copy of my book from me. So I have group work in that way. That's super affordable. But I'm also speaking on stages, and I'm fusing so many parts of who I am and who I've become, like singing at the end of my talks for my book tour. I'm that who's like, guess what? You are going to see all of me now. Because at this point, with what I've lived through, I am unapologetically standing in my power. But we'll get to that in the second part of the interview.
Yeah, I love that tremendously. And guys, go to thinkunbrokenpodcast.com for this and more in the show notes. My last question for you, my friend. What does it mean to you to be unbroken?
What that means is that no matter what happens in your life, from a great betrayal to a great success to the loss of a loved one, that you are always able to return back home to yourself, no matter what.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much for being here. Unbroken Nation, thank you guys for listening. Please leave a review, subscribe. Definitely share this with someone in your life who is maybe a little up like we are, because it will probably help them their journey. And until next time, my friends, be unbroken. I'll see you.
Thank you so much for listening to Think Unbroken. Please share this episode with someone who could use it and help us move forward in our mission of ending generational trauma in our lifetime. And if you would, please take 5 seconds to pop on iTunes or Spotify, hit that 5-star, leave a review, and you can also reach out to us on social at Michael Unbroken or at Think Unbroken. And of course, you can check out our YouTube channel at Think Unbroken. Thank you for being a part of Unbroken Nation, my friends, and until next time, be unbroken. We'll be right back to today's show, but before we do, I want to let you know that you can get a free copy of my first book, Think Unbroken, Understanding and Overcoming Childhood Trauma, when you leave a review for the podcast on Apple Podcast, either on desktop or on your phone. All you have to do is go to Apple Podcasts, look up Think Unbroken, click follow in the top right, and then go and leave a review at the bottom. And when you leave that review, screenshot it and send it over to book.thinkunbroken.com, where you can upload your contact and mailing information, and we will send you a free copy of this award-winning best-selling book, absolutely free, including shipping. Just go to book.thinkunbroken.com to upload your screenshot review from Apple Podcasts for the Think Unbroken podcast. And until next time, my friend, be unbroken. I'll see ya.